Hello and welcome to our brand new property show, Property Matters, the show where we talk about what's really going on in the property market and tackle some of the biggest challenges facing the industry. Now you can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or by email. Your hosts today are myself, Bryan Fox, and well-known property author Tallon.
Thank you, Bryan. And now this is exciting. To kick off what we hope will be the first of many shows, we have Ireland's original TV house hunter, Liz O'Kane from Hunter Estate Agents, to talk about the challenges facing buyers today and maybe some of the opportunities in the market that they might be missing out on. And after that, we will have the manager of one of Ireland's busiest business parks and proptech enthusiast, Gavin Gallagher, in to talk to us about the day-to-day realities of taking care of the 8,000 employees that pass through the gates of East Point Business Park every day. And he's going to tell us how real estate really needs to modernise. So, Liz, you're very welcome to Property Matters.
Great to see you, Carol. Been a little while.
It has been a while. I imagine you have a lot to say about what's going on at the marketplace in South Dublin right now.
Well, I suppose particularly in my own particular arena, as you know, I am a traditional estate agent by profession. However, I come at it from quite a different angle, from the point of view that I source and purchase property for people. So I act for the purchaser primarily. Okay, so my clients would be very broad, very varied people, from first-time buyers to primarily at the moment, in fact, actually the Irish returning to Dublin, who want to get a foothold into the Dublin market and quickly. And actually, I have a number of investors on my books as well at the moment.
Really?
So, yes, I do.
The market has changed, and it's funny. I think most people will probably remember you from your days on RTE's House Hunters. So you were always known as the original house hunter. You were Ireland's Kirsty Alsop. So...
Well, Kirsty was the very reason, in fact, that Kirsty was the very reason why I said I want to be a house hunter.
Really?
Yes, I had a 4-month-old child in a rocketosh when Kirsty started location, and I sat up and looked and said I want to be her, and literally started a very small business there that actually went on for 10 years and was really successful and brought me many opportunities around property columns and indeed the television, and that in fact is how you and I met.
That's true. It's going back a long time ago. That's probably about a decade and a half now, and obviously the marketplace is a very different one now. So tell me, of your buyers who are looking at the moment, like, is there such a thing as a typical buyer in the Dublin market right now?
Well, for me, the typical buyer is, there's one area that we should discuss in fact, and maybe we'll broach that first. My growing interest of buyers at the moment is in fact older people living in large homes who want to downsize. And this is a growing concern in the country because we have a housing crisis from the point of view that it's not necessarily a social housing crisis. There's also a housing crisis because as our population is ageing, we have lots of older people who don't have pensions living in large homes which they're finding very difficult to maintain. They may have lived in these homes for 30, 40, 50 years. And suddenly they find themselves in a position whereby they are first-time sellers.
Right. There's been some criticism that older people are almost being forced or guilted into downsizing, when the reality is there aren't suitable homes for people to downsize. And that's something actually that we've discussed, Bryan, before, about the lack of homes for older people, particularly in South Dublin, but actually in most parts of Ireland, to be able to trade down and stay within their community. Mm-hmm. How much of an issue is that in Dublin now?
Big issue, obviously, a very big issue. And I think older people are trying to hold on to their property. Why do you think they are?
They are for the very reasons we've just literally outlined: community.
Right.
You know, they don't want to move.
There's obviously an emotional attachment as well.
Of course there's an emotional attachment, yes, but you also need to release equity to have a nice older age. And if you do have that desire to downsize, if you live in a community where you play your golf, play your bridge, get your hair done, get your nails done, do your shopping, why in the world should any older person over the age of, do we say 65? Is that really older now? I don't know. I wouldn't say it was. But let's say over the age of 65. Why should you be forced to move to a rural area in order to buy a cheaper, smaller property? So we're back to a planning issue yet again. And interestingly, I spoke with a friend of mine recently who was involved in the Smart Ageing Exchange, and who is now in actual fact doing some work with Owen Murphy. In fact, Karen, hopefully,
minister.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully, you'll get the opportunity to speak with her. But I think a really great planning idea, in fact, is building apartment blocks in the middle of new housing developments.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a super duper idea because you'll get young professionals who need family homes who will buy the family homes and in time will transfer to an apartment and their community and social life is not affected at all. I think it's a really smart idea.
It is a smart idea, but and actually one of the other suggestions that I've heard, which comes back to this being a planning issue, is that actually in most of these very well established residential areas, there are many infill sites that could be used and that actually would be suitable for planning for smaller homes, especially if they were well designed. However, local opposition generally is the problem there. So as in these established neighbourhoods where you have a need for smaller homes, neighbours don't want that. They object to planning.
Yes, they can object to planning, but I really think you have to get a whole community educated around this, and you have to go and speak to all of the county councils, which in fact is actually happening. And look, from small acorns grow great trees, etc. But it is about education, and I mean, it's about you and me.
The other thing I wanted to put in here, because you did say there a moment ago that you cater for Irish returning to Dublin, Irish returning to Ireland. Is there any sort of specific demographic as such that are returning at the moment, or is it all ages and all sexes, I suppose?
No, there is a demographic. I'll be frank with you. There is a demographic. There are young professionals who are working overseas, generally in tax-free jurisdictions. You might have 2 lawyers, 2 engineers, 2 architects. They're making tax-free money or certainly paying very low tax in areas like Saudi, the UAE, Singapore, Vietnam, Hong Kong, etc. And they have, they have substantial savings. Mm-hmm. They are now being mortgage approved as Irish citizens abroad.
So are they still living away? So they're
living away. They're living away. They're mid-30s, living away with 2 small children. The dream is, and I have been one of these people, is to educate your children in Ireland. Oh, really? There's no salmon and knowledge in Saudi Arabia, so they all come straight back for a good Irish education.
So it's for the kids, basically?
No, and it's for themselves in time because, they don't, primarily they do not want to be expats for all of their professional lives. So I am purchasing property for that type of demographic.
Before they return to Ireland.
Before they return to Ireland. And properties to put straight into the rental market, straight away.
Until they're ready to come back and use them. So then, and I know that there's been a crackdown on mortgages there. And I think, in fact, Bank of Ireland was the most recent to come out and say they're not giving mortgages to buyers, Irish buyers living outside of Ireland planning to return home. So does that mean most of these are cash buyers, or are they getting funding?
No, they are being mortgaged. They are cashed. I mean, they predominantly cash and mortgage, but they are being mortgaged in Ireland. For their overseas mortgage. But what tends to happen is their approval in principle is only for 6 months. Now that is now slowly being extended to 12 months. But what tends to happen is they're sitting on their laptops in Singapore looking at daft.ie and suddenly realise 4 months into their approval in principle that they actually can't purchase anything because they are 6,000 miles away. So what will we do?
And
so
that's,
they go
that's when they phone Liz O'Kane.
And I turn up.
What's their attitude towards the market here at the moment, particularly in Dublin? I mean, with the squeeze now on price and so forth, is it an attractive proposition for them to come back?
It's still an attractive proposition for them. Yes, it is. I mean, look, it's everybody. Everybody is in their box. Mm-hmm. Everybody at whatever stage of life you are in. Mm-hmm. You have your first-time buyers who then need to trade up to a family home. Then they have 2 children. They want a slightly larger home. Then they stay in that home for 30 years, and then they need a 2-bedroom apartment. Mm-hmm. Everybody is in their box, but primarily these guys are coming back. They're looking for good 4-bedroom family homes. If they can get off-street parking, well, they've won the lotto. And decent gardens, close to national schools, close to good public transport.
Okay.
That's it.
So whether it's a buyer acting on their own or you indeed acting for buyers, how competitive is it out there at the moment?
It really depends. It really depends on the band that you're hunting in. I'll give you an example. At the moment, I am hunting at the moment for 2 properties, circa 650,000. One is outside the city centre. One is within the city centre. And at the moment, I would say there's a calming in the market. It's a little bit mellow. There's a little bit of anxiety. House prices have not dropped, but they've certainly calmed.
Yeah.
That's how I would describe it.
The rate of increase has definitely slowed over the past 9 months.
Yes, it's definitely.
Why do you think that's happened?
I think there's anxiety around Brexit. I think there's a lot of waiting and seeing what will happen, and what's our pound sterling going to look like after the 29th of March, or should we be getting our money out now? Equally, there's not a massive amount of stock around. Stock is still quite low pre-December 2018, but in the environment that I'm working in, I know that valuations are fourfold now. There's a lot of valuations happening. So come the spring, we should be seeing greater stock. But in saying all of that, my modus operandi has always been to attempt to purchase property when there's less competition around.
Of course.
So if somebody comes to me and says, I think I'll wait till March or April to see if there's any greater stock coming to the market, my immediate reaction is, well, there will also be greater competition. Yeah. Let's just go for it now.
Okay, and actually, Liz, you've just said something there that I think is worth repeating. You said valuations are up fourfold.
Yes.
That's massive. So spell out exactly what that means for house hunters in 3 and 6 months' time.
Well, it hopefully means that there will be 4 times more instructions than there was last year. We should see significantly more stock coming to the market. Stock was very, very low. Now, bearing in mind, we are talking about the capital. We're talking about the Eastern Seaboard here. So stock was low. And that squeezed the middle market, in my opinion. Now, the middle market to me is anything from €400,000 to €800,000. And there was tough competition to purchase properties at that level, because you have a lot of young professionals who have that sort of money to spend. I mean, I know it sounds like a colossal amount of money when you're talking about €700,000 or €800,000, but there's high salaries.
But they're just holding off then, is that the idea? They're holding off then in terms of moving? Even though they've got money to move and so forth?
No, they're desperate. They're desperate to purchase because they're up against approval in principle.
Okay.
Now, a lot of the approval in principles are now being extended for 12 months. But a lot of young professionals only have it for 6 months. If they don't purchase something within that 6 months period, they have to go back and do their due diligence and their administration all over again. And it is one pain in the rear end.
Okay, and can I ask something? Because this is something that I'm interested in, but I seem to be in the minority of. New homes, how do you think that's going to affect the South Dublin market? Because in my experience, experienced buyers tend to want second-hand homes because they've got larger gardens, usually better location, usually slightly closer to the city or bus routes. However, first-time buyers always seem to go for the new and the shiny, irrespective of whether the location is slightly worse. So is that something you're seeing at the moment? And how do you think the second-hand homes are going to fare as the stock of new homes comes to the market?
Okay, I'm not coming across very many new homes, houses close to the city centre. Yes, you have Claygate up in Dublin 18, up around Leopardstown, that direction, which sold out. They're selling out week by week. Most of the large homes up there are circa 800,000, 4-bedroom over 3 levels, sold. They all sold within a week. They were sitting, I won't say sold, sale agreed. They had deposits on those properties. Closer to the city centre, if you're talking about, I can give you an example, which is Maranella in Rathgar, which in fact is apartment living and housing side by side. Very similar properties, over 3 levels, as close to the city centre, are asking 1.6 million, and they are all sold. So,
and I think Marinella was one of the great examples that people were going to trade down. So actually, when we opened our conversation here, we talked about the lack of properties available for trading down. I am aware that was actually the apartments in Marinella were definitely somewhere that was chosen as a trading down location.
The only clients of mine who have purchased anything new are trader downers into apartments, into good quality, high-tech 2-bedroom apartments.
Okay, so can you give any solace then for people thinking of selling second-hand homes and they're concerned that their home is going to sit on the market for maybe a little bit too long when the flood of new homes actually hits the market, which we're starting to see at the moment? How is that affecting the length of time that second-hand properties are sitting on the market?
Look, there's one rule of thumb, all right? Go with a good valuation. If you overvalue, if you choose to go with an estate agent who is overvaluing your property in order to gain an instruction, your house is going to sit on the market for a really long time. People have lots of information and lots of portals to go to in order to draw their own comparables and find out what is sold in their location and in very recent times. If I'm making sense. You can go to the property price register. Estate agents have access to Property Week. And, you know, the property price register will tell somebody I'm in number 12 and number 9 down the road sold for 650,000 last year. Why in the world would my house be worth 750,000 when it's precisely the same property in a very similar condition? You know, it is not going to increase by 30% in the space of 12 months. So do your due diligence, get your 3 estate agents in, let the 3 estate agents value, like your agent, get to know your agent and ask them, please can you prove to me why you're giving me this valuation? And if one estate agent is saying 650,000 and the other is saying 750,000, naturally you want to be told that you've just won the lotto because you've got an extra 100 grand, but show me the proof.
Is that happening a lot at the moment?
That's how hunters would certainly operate. That's how we would operate.
Okay.
I would suggest that there are estate agents who overvalue for instruction and invariably discount or reduce in price after 4 weeks. Sorry, the market isn't what we thought it was.
Do you know, it's funny, the market has moved on. It might have changed over the past decade or two, but the fundamentals stay the same. If you overvalue your property, buyers know better. And they did even before the National Property Price Register, but now they know for sure. They don't just suspect it. And I think that's a really important tip for sellers. Now, before we finish up, tell me your top tips for buyers in the current marketplace.
Oh, good Lord, Carol, I wish you'd given me a sign to say this is the question I'm going to ask you. Top tips for buyers. Talk to me. Number 1 tip, give me a buzz, give Liz O'Kane a buzz and I can talk you through the top tips. But I would say, look, do good research, all right? Be realistic. In fact, if you've got €500,000 to spend, search under the bracket of 550,000. Not everything is making its asking price currently. Lots of properties are sitting and there have also been sales that have fallen through. And maybe take a day off work. Do what I actually do for my clients who are overseas or on the ground here and who don't have the time. Take a day off work, tee up 6, 8 or maybe even 10 appointments in one day and eliminate at the end of the day and get your shortlist together. And one big tip I would say is do not eliminate a property having looked at it on myhome.ie or daft.ie. You need to see a property and not write it off online.
That's just one thing I've got to ask you. With about 2 minutes left, you kept referring to stock, lack of stock. What do you think the government, or is there anything the government can do to sort of increase stock, given incentives to buyers? Or
is that for the next budget?
That's
for the next budget, is it?
But there is an agency, I think, that has been set up, Carol, am I right? That is going to try and help builders if they have got sufficient
That's cash. Right, the new House Building Finance Agency. The initiative. However, remember that initiative has been given a pot of 750 million, and they are to deliver 7,000 homes. Now, maths is not necessarily my strong point, but I don't think you're going to make over 7,000 homes out of 750 million. So I'm not terribly sure who that's there to benefit. But it is good.
And is that for Dublin and the Greater Dublin area?
Yes, and but remember that this initiative is going to be rolled out. So in fact,
initially Dublin, I think, isn't it?
It is initially, but remember, it's the same. Technically, it's a new agency, but actually, it's the same staff, it's the same management as NAMA, and actually NAMA, for all of its criticism, was actually a very effective at doing what it needed to do. So this gives me hope. So, Liz, you've given us lots to think about. And we know that for you, hopefully you've given some comfort to sellers, but particularly for buyers, they now know that there is a secret opportunity in the market, and that is to contact Liz O'Kane, the original TV house hunter.
Happy to have a conversation with anybody, and Carol, I really appreciate you inviting me along.
That was enjoyable. House Hunters Agents. And next up, we'll be talking about the rise in co-living. Is it really student living for young professionals? We'll be joined by Ed Burke, founder of Roomigo, to give us the insights into why working people would choose this. So come back to us in a couple of minutes. So coming up next is Ed Burke. He's founder of Roomigo, an Irish company that brings potential housemates together. Ed, you're welcome to Property Matters. And I'm going to let you do the intro.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm delighted to welcome Ed Burke, founder of Roomigo, because Roomigo is I think it's one of the startups that's really capturing the trends that we're seeing in the marketplace at the moment for co-living. So, Ed, you're very welcome. Please explain to us, first of all, what exactly is co-living?
Well, guys, thank you very much for having me on. So delighted to be here. So Roomigo is a platform for matching compatible housemates. So it's aimed primarily at young professionals, people in their 20s, but we also have many members in their 30s and even beyond on the platform. And what happens is people find like-minded people to live with. So you could be, say, moving to Dublin, and you might want to rent an apartment. You need someone else to rent that apartment with. So you could be, say, a 25-year-old, young person. You like to live that work hard, play hard lifestyle. So you might like to find somebody like that. Or you could be, you could be really into sports or yoga, or you could be a vegan and you might want to find people to live with that share those lifestyle choices. In addition to that, increasingly we're seeing people rent out the spare rooms in their apartments and houses. So if you're renting out the spare room in your home, you're going to want to live with someone who's a good fit for your home. After all, it's your home. Unlike short-term rentals for a few days, the people with whom you live becomes much more important, because it's the place you live, it's your home, and it's all about a community. And this brings me around to the whole concept of co-living. Co-living is all about creating kind of communities in the home, communities of like-minded people, which improves your standard of living and your lifestyle. Because if you're living with the wrong people or people you don't get on with, that really diminishes your lifestyle.
And of course, loneliness is a big issue that we hear about at the moment, loneliness within young people. And maybe that's part of the reason, because actually I think that there was maybe a misconception that co-living and sharing homes as an adult was really a financial choice. It was because you didn't want to spend while you were saving for a mortgage, or you wanted to keep your costs down. But you're telling me that it really goes beyond a financial choice.
Absolutely. I mean, more people than ever before are moving to urban areas and cities around the world. And if you move to a new city, imagine if you moved to London tomorrow and you knew nobody. That could be an incredibly lonely place to be, whereas it can be an incredibly fun place in a new city if you actually have, a good network of people around you, a support group. And that's another thing that co-living and Roomigo gives you. It actually helps you, find like-minded people. And yes, this isn't a financial issue solely. Rising rents and urbanisation does, of course, lead to more people sharing. But this is really becoming a lifestyle choice for people. So, I was interviewed on Ryan Tubridy before the Roomigo launched, and we were talking about this concept. And he remarked to me, sure, doesn't Paddy Cosgrave and his wife, and kid live with other people? So,
and that's, of course, the founder of the Web Summit.
Absolutely. So it's something that, people in their 30s are doing, people in their 20s and even older. So, if I was moving I lived in Singapore, and I had a good job in Singapore, but why would I live on my own? So I always shared housing.
Did you share in Singapore?
Absolutely.
And how easy was it, as an Irish person relocating for work to Singapore, how easy was it to find somebody compatible to share with?
Well, it was actually very difficult.
That doesn't surprise me.
So it was actually really difficult, because I remember, for example, I was moving accommodation in my last year in Singapore, and I was working a job from, say, 8:30 in the morning, and I was never home much before 7 or 8. So then I was going around in the evenings trying to find a place to live. And this is exhausting, because you can only view one or two places in the evening.
And that's when you're from the area and know the area.
Absolutely. And my sole thing was, look, there's plenty of houses in Singapore, because there's no property shortage in Singapore. So it's actually the opposite to Ireland. But so for me, it's like I'm trying to live with people, the right people that will kind of make my lifestyle, better. And at that stage, I was thinking in my head, I want to become an entrepreneur, but I didn't have the idea. But funnily enough, I thought that for me, if I'm going to become an entrepreneur, what is one way to do that? And I felt by living with other entrepreneurs, that's going to help kind of make me more creative and maybe encourage me to be an entrepreneur. So
That's interesting. I've never heard that given as the reason to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, but where did you come up with the idea? Or how did you come
So
up
how I
with the
came up with the idea was I was going to...
I've realised now I've been pronouncing it all totally incorrectly. It's
no.
Roomigo.
So it's like Room and Amigo kind of merged together.
Right.
So
Brian, could
Spanish and English.
Could you imagine having a Roomigo?
Yes,
would you embrace shared living at this stage?
I just want to hear how you came up with the idea, because it's fascinating.
So the way I came up with the idea was I was going around in Singapore trying to find a place to live. And eventually, after weeks of going around, I found a condo, and it had a bunch of entrepreneurs. They're all entrepreneurs. Like when I went in to view the place, I could see the whiteboard up, and their office kind of was in
Was
the
it
home.
a business model canvas?
So it was just...
And these entrepreneurs from various different countries.
These were international entrepreneurs, expats that were living in Singapore. And I just thought to myself, wow, this is really cool. I love what they're doing. I love the vibe here. And then I thought to myself, you know what? I should have been able to go on a website and with the click of a few buttons, find entrepreneurial type people to live with. Because at that stage, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And likewise, I could love playing squash at the weekends, something I actually, did a lot of in Singapore, and maybe say watching rugby. And if you're really into following sports, you might want to live with sporty people, because that might be something you do at the weekend in your house. Whereas if you hate sports,
you started the website yourself then?
Yeah.
Without any help, without any guidance or from anyone else? Right?
So what I actually did was, when I was in Singapore, while I was working, I did an evening program called the Founder Institute, and I was doing that whilst working. And the whole concept behind that is an idea incubator, and it's to help you kind of create a company. So I did that for a few months, and out of that I kind of developed the idea that I had got. And then I thought, okay, I had an idea. I was still working in Singapore, so I worked there for a few more months, and then I decided to come back to Ireland and to set up Roomigo in Dublin.
And did you have any difficulty getting finance for it?
So what I did was I joined a program called the New Frontiers in Ireland. The New Frontiers is backed by Enterprise Ireland, and what it does is it gives you some finance to
seed money, I suppose.
Yeah, it gives you some. It gives you some. It's actually a grant, which is fantastic. So it's a grant, and it gives you like 6 months to like develop an idea. Plus, you also go through their program, so they bring in experts, and you actually go in, and you've got a peer group around you. So after I did New Frontiers, what I did then was I needed some investment to bring it to the next stage. So I applied to a technology accelerator called the NDRC. The NDRC is Ireland's #1 early stage investor. So they came on board as our first investor. And the really cool thing about the NDRC is they're based near the Guinness Storehouse in a co-working space. So there's loads of different companies that have gone through their accelerator in there. So you get the space, you get the mentoring that they give you, and you also get to be in this space with lots of other entrepreneurs. And I think for anybody that wants to start up a business, it's incredibly important that you have a support group around you, a bunch of other, entrepreneurs. So that's how we got started. It really kind of got going with the NDRC.
And look, I would say I think that's amazing, but I also think that you really came at this problem at the right time, because it seems to be a global problem that you've hit on. Can you really just explain to us the scale of opportunity for Roomigo? How many countries are you in at the moment?
Well, actually, this scale is just incredible, because this isn't, this would work in almost any urban city that I can think of, in the world, except for perhaps North Korea. Literally, it kind of works.
Well, that would be difficult.
So you're telling us we're not going out in North Korea?
I don't think it'd be very safe either, to be honest.
But how many countries are you in at the moment?
So what we did, we started off by creating social media housemate groups on Facebook, and I've created housemate groups in 23 different cities around the world, and all of the there's over 100,000 people in my Facebook groups, and so I have, say, a group in Dublin, another one in Berlin, one in London, Munich, kind of, I have them all over the place, and I can look at each group, okay, in each city, and it helps me kind of understand the local market. And because of that, I have developed a kind of incredible knowledge of the various local markets, which has helped us plan our strategy for the actual platform that we've launched. So we built the Facebook communities first, then we built the Roomigo website, and on the Roomigo website we've launched it in Dublin. So our plan next is to actually go into Berlin, because the opportunity in Berlin for Roomigo and co-living is just incredible. So 85% of Berlin.
That's a good point. Is there a typical market that is more attractive for this type of living as opposed to anything else?
I think it's particularly popular in urban areas and cities, because that's where they're
large urban areas.
Large
with lots of expats. And
lots of expats, because this particularly targets people, say, working in tech or moving about.
Professional people.
Professional people. So cities like Berlin, Amsterdam, many different cities around.
Dublin. I suppose Dublin would be attractive from the point of view of the tech companies that are here at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just it's all kind of professionals in their 20s, and I would say many in their 30s.
Do they have to pay? For instance, if I want to sign up tonight now to look for a place, say in New York, what do I do?
Well, so we haven't launched in New York yet, but that's in the pipeline.
Brian, you would have to pick the city that he's not in.
Say Dublin now.
So for example, in Dublin, we launched in Dublin, and we've had incredible traction in Dublin. Thousands of people working in companies all over Dublin have joined Roomigo, and lots of expats.
Do I pay?
So what you do?
With you. So I'm living in New York. I'm moving to Dublin.
So what you actually do is you create a profile on Roomigo, which is free to create. It's almost like a social media profile, LinkedIn, or even kind of a dating site like Tinder. Sure. What happens is you have your photo, you have a bio, and the unique thing about Roomigo is there are 40 different lifestyle choices we have, ranging from night owl, party animal, someone who's quiet, bookworm, yoga, etc., and you get to choose 8 lifestyle choices, and this makes the platform kind of incredibly authentic, because everybody chooses what's important to them at the beginning. So once you've created your profile, you have the choice to make the profile live and public so other people can see it. So then you can find other people that have similar choices to you. So for example, also, once you've created the profile, you can contact people that have rooms and people that are looking for rooms. You can send them connection requests, a little bit like in LinkedIn, and a connection request can be accepted or declined. So you can't spam people. It has to be, the connection request must be, accepted or declined.
Okay, and
Sorry, Brian, that's amazing. I'm fascinated by this, particularly as we're going through such a chronic shortage in rental properties at the moment in Ireland, and not just a shortage, but actually the cost of rental obviously is outrageous. That actually really prohibits people from saving for the deposit on a house or saving to do anything. So how many people do you have in Dublin currently looking for roommates?
Well, on our platform we have over 6,000 members, and we're growing every week. So that's our total membership, and on a weekly basis we would have hundreds of new people joining. So it's a constant influx of people every day.
You obviously know where they're coming from as well. Predominantly.
So it's a mix of Irish people and expatriates.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But then I suppose the next logical question has to be, how is this working out for the housemates? How are they finding it?
Well, I mean, it's actually working out really well. So we got an incredible amount of feedback of people who sometimes people would put up on social media, have you heard about this Roomigo thing? What's that like? And people would respond, and they would say, they've used Roomigo. It's helped them find flatmates, for example.
And if I were leaving you now, for instance, would I do a review of you if I were leaving you?
Well, we don't actually have a review system on the platform.
Yeah.
It's something
that's like Airbnb. Like, in other words, when I leave your apartment, I will do a review of it.
We don't have the review system like Airbnb, but it's some sort of endorsement system is something that we're considering implementing for the future. It's more long term. So this is like people living in houses for a month at a minimum, but most people are like 6 months plus. So with Airbnb, people are coming and going all the time. So it's a little bit different. So we're thinking about maybe a system of endorsements.
Very good. Ed, I would love your opinion on this. Are attitudes towards home ownership changing in Ireland? Is this a temporary stopgap until people fall into the 2-bed apartment in the city centre or 3-bed semi in the suburbs? Are the people you're working with, do they still look that? Are they still looking for that? Or is this a changing attitude towards home ownership?
I think it's a change in attitude towards home ownership. People are renting for longer. The rental industry, like throughout Europe, is exploding. I think the number of people renting in Dublin has something like doubled over the last few years since 2011. I mean, it's really going up. So it's a changing attitude. But also, if you look historically, I read a report recently enough about Ireland. Ireland wasn't always purely just about home ownership. If you go back, I'm not sure, was it like the 50s or something, like the renting was actually more popular. So it's like, I think these things go in cycles, and at the moment, renting is just it's becoming a huge thing. People are doing it for longer. People want to have the flexibility to be able to move jobs. If you think about it now, like maybe 20 years ago, people might get a job and it's the same job for life. Now, people are changing jobs all the time. They're moving cities, and if they're paying a mortgage on a house, it just makes it much more difficult to do that, which is why renting is becoming much more popular.
Portability is the whole thing, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
But Ed, are you maintaining then that actually this is a choice?
The choice of renting or buying?
Yes.
I think so. I mean, absolutely. I mean,
I think I might be a little bit behind the curve on this, because I'm just not seeing it. I'm still hearing from people who are quite desperate to become homeowners. And I think in Ireland we haven't fully developed a suitable alternative for home ownership, so that people who choose not to become homeowners, that they actually have some way to live post-retirement without paying rent. And I don't know if we've got that figured out yet.
It's a good point. It also, there are many factors coming in. I mean, people are getting married older than they did before. So, you're single. You're 25. Are you going to?
Demographics are constantly changing, aren't they?
The demographics are changing, and I think people still want to buy homes, but they're just doing it at an older stage in their lives than they would have done in the past. They want to have that maybe 10, 15 plus years from when they leave college to have the opportunity to move around, work globally. They might be single, they're getting married older. So it's just that I think people still want to buy homes, but I think it's just been pushed out to a later stage. So
it's maybe not a priority. Well, look, before we finish up, Ed, you might just, for our listeners who might actually be looking for roommates, might have a spare room in their house, or they actually might have adult children, which we're seeing increasingly, particularly in Dublin and across Leinster at the moment. They've got adult children living at home who are trying to find places to rent. So maybe house sharing and co-living is a good alternative for them. Can you just tell them where to find your details?
Well, absolutely. So you can look up my website, spelled roomigo.io. That's Roomigo. And on Roomigo, please sign up. It's really easy to do. Plus, we also have a live chat on the website where you can contact me. or you can email me at ed@roomigo.io, and I'd be delighted to help.
So that's Ed Burke, founder of Roomigo. I'll have to get it correctly. Thanks for coming in. And next, we're going to take a break now, and this is Property Matters here in Dublin South FM. Stay with us for another while, and next guest is Gavin Gallagher, manager of the East Point Business Park. And welcome back to Property Matters here in Dublin South FM. With Bryan Fox here and Tallon. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio. Now, so our next guest is Gavin. Sorry, Carol, that's for you. That's for you, excuse me.
These are the joyous teething problems that we're having. It's great. Yeah. So I'm actually most delighted to welcome Gavin Gallagher. Anybody who listens to anything that I talk about on any forum will be well familiar with Gavin Gallagher, who is manager of the East Point Business Park. Again, as mentioned earlier, there are 8,000 people going through those gates every morning, so there's a lot of responsibility on his shoulders. But also, most people would be familiar with Gavin from proptech.tv. That's probably one of the most informative sites for proptech out there. Welcome.
Thanks, Carol. Thanks. 8,000 people. It's a busy park. We started it around about 1994. And we built a number of buildings sort of in stages, and it was slow kind of growing. And then obviously when we got into the recession and stuff like that, there wasn't really a lot of appetite for investment in technology and things like that. So we have this great technology park that's got tenants like Oracle and Google and all of this. But Virgin Media are there.
The original Silicon Docks.
The original Silicon Docks.
It is actually. It's funny. We have.
You were there before Hanover and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We built the first building in '94, and it opened around '95 or something. It was Kindle banking systems, and then over time, then we started.
Can I ask you, sorry, why that particular area is a matter of interest? Because that's just off the bridge, off the tunnel there.
Yeah, it was actually it's all reclaimed land. It was, if you go back to the 1960s, that was actually a refuse tip. And so it was compacted. They reclaimed a lot of land. It was compacted, and then they, after something like 25 years of remediation and stuff, they basically sort of sold off the land. And we saw an opportunity. We went along and we bought the land. It's about 40 acres, and
the business park is 40 acres.
It's 40 acres.
That's huge. Where does that place it in terms of Ireland's business parks? It must be one of the largest.
I think we are one of the largest. Yeah, and we're certainly the closest to the city centre. Like, people consider us to be a suburban park, but actually we're less than a mile from O'Connell Street. So it's. And
why did you have? What was your decision process? I we ask you, in terms of going business as opposed to industrial.
Well, it's funny you say that, because when we started the process of actually designing this thing, it was actually initially light industrial was what we had in mind. And if you go back far enough in time, there was a period in time when they actually were looking at putting a light aircraft landing strip there and things like that. So
for a private?
It was not so much, well, it was more sort of just, I think there's a name for it, it's short takeoff and landing runway strip or something like that. Yeah. And so there was a lot of different plans.
You're so close to the port there.
This is the thing, yeah. We are actually part of East Point. The phase that we initially bought was private, but then the second part, we built an additional phase, which is actually a joint venture with Dublin Port. And Dublin Port are co-owners with us in that. And so Bond Road, when we first bought it, there was no connection with Bond Road, but now our rear entrance goes into the Bond Road, which is part of Dublin Port.
Wow. And since 1994, you've actually been able, and I know that you've actually worked in a number of different countries since then, but since then, I can imagine you've seen a lot of change amongst the tenants.
Well, it's funny you say that, because it's not, I mean, there have been tenants coming and going, and obviously with the rises and falls of, technology, or not even technology, just industry in general. I mean, we had American Airlines there for quite a few years, and then in 2001, 9/11 happened, and within a couple of months those guys wanted out of the park. They were closing down operations and stuff. And but other people come in and fill in those gaps. And then over time, certain businesses, they grow and they shrink and stuff. We've had tenants there since, Oracle have been there since the start almost, and they started out in one building. Now they're in 7 buildings. Like, they're a big, huge occupier in there. They're very important occupier. Google are in there as well, and they
like
are
anchor tenants, I suppose, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's in more than one or two buildings is pretty important, and those guys have multiple buildings and thousands of staff on a daily basis coming and going. We actually have a bus service that we use, and we have a shuttle that brings people from the park to the Lewis at the Point Depot, and we also bring them to the Dart station in Clontarf.
That's excellent.
And we do about 3,500 people a day.
Is that right, really?
Yeah.
And in terms of marketing, I mean, do you go abroad to try and market the park, or?
Well, the thing is our marketing at the moment, the park is 99.5% occupied.
Really?
So there's really no point in us marketing it, because if somebody comes along and says, yes, we'd like space, we don't actually have anything to give them at the moment. Now we're starting to look at what our options are, because it's quite a low-rise park. You know, it's 2 or 3 stories at the most. Some of the newer, parts of it are taller, but the original parts are 2 floors over a ground floor. And so nowadays we look at it and we're going to say, geez, you build 5 or 6 or 7 floors.
The potential is there, particularly as we know Dublin skyline is about to change dramatically. So
it's great to see that, by the way. I've always been a fan of high rise. And I mean, in fact, my college thesis was actually a high rise scheme for where the Ulster Bank next to Tara Street station is.
Of course.
I actually designed a high, for my college degree, I did architecture.
Did that plan take in part of where Johnny Ronan is trying to get Tara Tower?
It did. Actually,
did you envisage a tower that high?
I had a 40-story building in there. Not
okay,
his is only 20.
He's only looking for 26, is it?
He's looking for 26. I was looking for 40.
So you definitely would have given that to him. But I absolutely agree with you. It's time that Dublin embrace this.
I don't understand just the attitude, because what you're doing is you're growing the footprint wider and wider and wider instead of kind of just a kind of a concentrated tall.
It's an attitude of mind, though, isn't it? Really,
I don't know. Yeah, it's like if you go to somewhere like Singapore, it's almost at different levels. It's like a 3-dimensional city. At different parts you have. So you have almost no traffic on the streets because there's no need for cars, because you can live and work in the same building.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and that's a huge improvement on.
Yeah, but I think when we're looking at Dublin and how it's going to grow, you have to look at the foundations that are there and what's there at the moment. And I know that there's an increasing conversation amongst urbanists that, by the way, I'm very much in favour of high rise for Dublin, but there's an increasing conversation about maybe the waste that's around Dublin City, and that there's a lot of infill sites that could be used as well as going high. So I don't think that urban sprawl is necessarily because of the lack of height. I think it's because of a number of different things, including very poor planning, not use of infill sites, maybe not compulsory purchasing sites when they were available. Sure. So I think there's a number of different reasons for that, but they're all quite symptomatic of the changes we're seeing in Dublin right now, and with the commercial occupiers that are coming in. Now, because East Point is so well established, are you getting a sense of the changing trends, for example, towards co-working?
Right.
Oh yeah, that's something
hot desking, I suppose.
There's hot desking. I mean, one of the things that we've noticed, because WeWork are obviously have quite a big footprint now in Dublin, and they're also the largest in London and they're the largest in New York. And I've been following WeWork since 2007, I think it is.
What's the new name change?
It's called just We Company. You know?
It will take a while to get used to that.
Yeah, We Company. But the thing about those guys is they're offering a change of mentality for occupiers. Occupiers nowadays are changing so rapidly that you're looking at somebody who comes in and sort of says, okay, I've got 50 people, but I might have 150 next year. And that is very hard. Like, most companies would only grow at 10% per annum or something, so they'd be adding 5 people. You're talking about companies that are going 200% in a year, and traditional leases haven't been flexible enough to offer that. You're expecting somebody to sign a 10-year lease.
But that hasn't changed.
Well, that hasn't, but if you look at the Dublin City now today, there's a lot of inquiries out there for, say, 100,000 square foot buildings, but there's almost no inquiries now for 5,000 square foot, because people are just going straight to the WeWorks and they're hiring 50 desks if they need 50 desks, and they know that they can have 80 desks at a heartbeat, or they can have 30 desks, and it's very, very flexible like that. Whereas you come to someone a traditional, office landlord, they're looking to make you sign a 10-year lease. You've got to go and, you've got to enter into all these dilapidations sort of obligations and stuff. So it's not attractive, and it's something that we as landlords, I think, have to be very careful about, because WeWork are going to sweep up a lot of those smaller, nimble kind of technology companies that are growing very quickly. And they just, also the balance sheets, if you look at some of these American companies, they have their balance sheets are based on, they look at things like a long-term lease as an obligation, like a debt. And so it actually badly affects their balance sheet. So if you go and sort of say to them, no, you can have a totally flexible desks, it doesn't have any impact on their balance sheet. So immediately the board are all saying we should do that.
We should do that, of course. But do you think a part of this is the changing expectations, not necessarily of the tenants, but the occupiers, as in the employees who are coming into work? The standard of office space is expected to improve, but it's improving in a way that we might not have expected 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we might have thought that an improvement in office space was better ventilation, maybe better facilities, ergonomic chairs. I don't think we were expecting beanbags, dartboards and pool tables.
Well, definitely there's a lot of change, but what we've found, that kind of what you've said there about beanbags and stuff, that is not as predominant as you would think, but
more high-techy with the more high-tech.
That's the high-tech, the kind of those guys, and there's a kind of a nickname, it's culture and stuff like that. But I think the reality, people are expecting more. I'm hearing the word wellness a lot now, and that is something that people are looking is for there to be wellness, and there to look flexible space. But I've been talking to one of the financial institutions, one of the larger ones here. I have a friend who's involved in those, and they're looking at introducing an app where there's actually they're able to do desk sharing, and you can actually book a desk, you can book a meeting room using your phone. And so this is stuff these guys are looking at, and they're also looking at the ability to have a certain amount of space in co-working.
So is this like a concierge service for a very small business or startup? Or
no, these are
employees of
large companies, like the likes. If you go to the States and stuff, WeWork would 30% of their company is taken by the large companies with over 100,000 staff. 30%. So those guys are taking huge amounts of desks. Xerox and stuff would have thousands and thousands of desks across America from WeWork. And so the large companies are all starting to do this. And so here in Dublin, I think you're going to start seeing some of the institutions doing the same thing.
Speaking of which, just curious now at this point in time, because you must be you've got your ear to the ground in relation to business movement and so forth. We're hearing all about the Dysons and the various banks and car companies that are thinking of moving out of the UK. What's your sense of how it's affecting Dublin?
I think there's been a little bit of a bump from Brexit, but I think there's also a little bit of spin around it. And you've had some people saying, one of the large American banks have come into Dublin because of Brexit. But in fact, if you go and dig a little bit deeper, you find that was actually a consolidation, and they were in 3 or 4 buildings and they consolidated to one, and they're calling that the Brexit kind of. But actually, I don't think there was very many staff at all coming from the UK. It was actually more just a consolidation, and somebody decided to kind of badge it up as a Brexit move. So there's a little bit of spin.
It suits the agenda.
It suits the agenda, possibly. And but definitely the uncertainty now, you can really see it in the UK. It's starting to impact decision making, and I don't know. It seems like a huge own goal to me that they're doing this, and
there must be total exhaustion too with business people or whatever, the whole thing.
Do you invest in your business? Do you what's happening? You like to have like a 2 to 3 year plan for
absolutely,
and you can have no plan because you don't know whether you're going to be in business next year in this country or not. It must be impossible for them. So I don't know.
So do you see an opportunity there as a landlord yourself?
It's most definitely an opportunity, but I think kind of the horse has bolted because we don't have the ability to deliver the amount of residential accommodation that this would be would be required.
That is a problem, and every time a business leader, an international business leader, calls Dublin out on that, there's outrage, and we see it as political spin. But that's just the reality. It's what large employers are finding, that Dublin is becoming less tenable. for their staff. And
I think the transport...
It becomes expensive. It becomes... transport is bad. I mean, but if you look at, like, if a bank, like if JP Morgan or somebody wanted to kind of hire 1,000 staff, where are they going to get them from? Are they going to come from the UK? If that's the case, where's 1,000 people going to find accommodation? Where are schools going to, accommodate all this? Or are they just going to headhunt them from other institutions, in which case the same pool is there, it's just they've moved from one bank to another. So it's a difficult one, I think.
You see, there are challenges here, and we've certainly looked to technology to try address some of these challenges, and I know that that's something you're quite passionate about as well, the rise in proptech, which is the technology concerning the planning, construction and property industry. In fact, you're the man behind proptech.tv.
Yeah.
So, and that's starting to gain great momentum in Ireland and more particularly outside of Ireland.
Yeah, it's huge.
Tell us about it.
Well, I mean, property technology or proptech is the buzzword we're all using these days. And that is, it's really any technology that kind of impacts on the built environment. And I think it's massive opportunity to solve some of the problems that we have. If you take, say, for example, the housing crisis that we're experiencing today, you've got, it takes from the date that you buy a piece of land to get planning permission on it, to go through the legal process on it, and then to actually physically build it. You're probably looking at 2.5 years minimum between the date that you've identified the piece of land and your first house has been delivered. We're building houses through the business I'm involved in, and that would be a fairly quick turn. If you turn it around within 2.5 years, you're doing quite well. Now, if you look at the technology that's out there in terms of the legal process, certain countries now are employing blockchain, and you can transact in a couple of hours, let alone the 16 weeks or the 12 weeks that it can take to close a deal. So that's 16 weeks shaved off your transaction. Then you go and look at your planning process. At the moment you put in your planning permission, and you're looking at 2 months of, like the planning department will say that they'll turn around and they'll answer you in 2 months. It's never 2 months. It's, after 2 months you get something back from them, and then it's another couple of months. So you lose 4 or 5 months. Then often than not, you go to Onboard Planola, which adds another 9 months to so that's another year. If you were to have, say, artificial intelligence systems that are able to kind of like assess plans and kind of work out, okay, this pretty much kind of fits within the program that we're looking for, and therefore we're going to sort of speed up this process or pass it on to humans only when it's passed a certain amount of checks or something like that. There just must be ways that we can completely short circuit the planning system so that we can knock it down to 1 month or something. That would save a year.
Do you know, it's funny, when I hear about the delays caused by planning, I always wonder, how is that possible? In fact, you're talking about, are there ways to circumvent it? And yes, of course we should be using AI and other we should be using the data that we have. But what I can't figure out is, why don't we just stick with the simple, as in, there's a regional plan, there's a local plan. If the planning fits within the local plan, it's a non-issue. Why are we wasting any time on it? It's
true. I think the problem that I've seen anyway is that planning managers get involved, and they have personal sort of preferences for certain things.
People are the problem when it comes to property.
I think a lot of that is some of the issue is that people have personal views on stuff, as opposed to, I don't think nowadays we're in a situation where you've got just such a housing crisis that we can't have people holding up projects for their personal sort of preferences for a certain tile or a certain house look. I think it really should be that we should be using technology to move this process forward. The construction side, I mean, that's another thing. I mean, traditional house building, you've got the guys, the brickies, and you've got all this kind of stuff. There's now machines that are able to lay bricks. There's all of this stuff.
But Gavin, the problem at the moment is that we don't have brickies and we don't have trades.
Well, we don't have this.
I was speaking to main contractors over the last couple of weeks, and the danger is actually trying to keep their trades on site, because there's such a shortage that they can walk off site at any reason, and there's better jobs available paying more every single day. So actually, I mean, we can talk about robotic bricklayers, but realistically, why aren't we just having the conversation about prefabrication and modular builds and off-site construction?
Looking at the, for example, there's a building in, I think it's Vancouver in Canada, and it's 17 stories high, and it's made of brick. Sorry, not a brick. It's made of wood. Okay, 17
stories
high, and it's made of mass timber using glulam technology. So it was prefabricated. There's a concrete core for the lifts and stuff like that, and for some of the structural stuff. But that's it. The building was. How fast do you think it was built? 17 stories. 66 days.
Oh my goodness me! You mentioned blockchain there, and that's something I'd love to pursue with you as well. But for now, I'm afraid we're pretty much out of time. So, Gavin Gallagher, manager of East Point Business Park, thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
And that's it from us today. Thank you for joining us on this launch of Property Market, the show where property matters.
And coming up next week, we'll be talking about promoting Irish property outside of Ireland, what we can expect from the mortgage market in 2019, and we'll hear how property buyers are getting on using the latest 24/7 online bidding technology through their estate agents.
But as I say, that's it for this week's show. We want to thank Liz O'Kane, Ed Burke and Gavin Gallagher. Peter Baker was on sound Peter Baker and Katie Tallon was on sound. Emma was responsible for producing. We're back at the same time next week, so stay tuned for Bowl of Soup, which is coming up next. But for now, for Karen Tallon and me, Brian Fox, goodbye.